Welcome to season 2, episode 3 of EsaysPsays, your weekly dose of black love. My name is Ellen for the E.
And my name is Paul for the P.
One, two, three, four.
For those of you tuning in for the first time, we decided to start this podcast to celebrate a milestone in our relationship. 35 years of wedded bliss, and now we will be married 36 years as of 4/22/25. Each week we'll share a part of our relationship with you so you can see what has brought us this far and will take us even further.
This week we will be discussing parenting again and how individually we knew that each child would be able to make it in this world. Because we all know raising children is a job, it can be a rewarding one, but there are still times.
We basically have two only children because they are 9 years apart. However, they are totally different individuals. They have a lot in common, but they also have things that are totally separate from each other, which gives them their personalities. And we also had the pleasure of raising some bonus children. I call them nephews, and a couple of them and the others are second cousins. So as not to make a distinction, I had them all call us Uncle Paul and Ellen Auntie.
Although I am sure most of you know our kids from our episodes where we discuss them, we will refer to them as Son 1 and Son 2. Well, this week we discussed Son 2, which was more planned than Son 1. Obviously, it took 9 years. So when Son 2 was on the way, we were more ready than we were with Son 1. Though we did have to take some refresher parenting classes and shop for all of the baby stuff from scratch and see how prices had changed in that time frame. And a lot had changed for us. We were now in a different stage in life once again. I had been working for several years, and Paul and I were 9 years older and more tired. Now it would be called a geriatric pregnancy. Ugh.
I was happy to hear about us expecting another baby. I looked at it as an absolute blessing. I was happy that my oldest son would have another sibling to share his life with.
Since I was a working mom this time around, being pregnant was interesting. I was also traveling on public transportation, something I was used to as a New Yorker, but not as much fun when you start to show and gain weight. Since we did not have a car at the time and lived in Baltimore, also, getting around on weekends and after hours was not fun. It could be done, but it took more time. And once again, though it was 1999, cell phones were still not popular and there was no Uber or Lyft. There were hacks in Baltimore City. All hacks are drivers who don't have a proper taxi license. But if you were outside of the area, you had to wait for the bus or find a hotel till the next morning. And I do not think buses ran on Sundays in certain areas of Baltimore. Since I'm always good for a pregnancy story, this time, son one and I went to Wally World, also known as Walmart in Glen Burnie. We usually did something on the weekends I got paid. On this particular day, we ate at Golden Corral and then walked over to Wally World. I was picking up a few things for the baby and figured taking the bus wouldn't be an issue. So, of course, I unfortunately bought more than expected, and we had to walk to the bus stop in the dark. Son 2 was only 9, so he could only carry so much. Undoubtedly, it was an interesting journey trying to return home and having to make our way down with packages. And I do believe we had to transfer buses at least once. After that, I learned my lesson and either shopped closer to home or found a friend with a car. I also did something similar with Son 1. I was shopping and taking in a movie at the Alamo Mall, a place I believe I mentioned in the last episode. Although Paul and I had a previous issue with the bus, I stayed out until the last bus again. And this time the bus stopped near a dark bar and the railroad tracks. The driver said, "Last stop." All I can say is prayer works. I was able to call Paul from a payphone that was near the bus stop to let him know what was happening. I also considered going into the bar, but it was pitch black and I did not get a good feeling. Paul really couldn't help me because he didn't drive, and at the moment, there was no access to anyone that did. Thankfully, by the time I figured I wasn't going to make it home or have to call the police, another bus showed up and I was able to get home. You would have thought I would have learned from this adventure with Son One. However, I will say that it was pregnancy brain.
Yes, I would say so. One would think that you would have learned not to do that again. But no.
Hey, it's hard being a New Yorker and going to these other places. You think that public transportation works the same way.
That's why they say New York is the greatest city in the world, because it's a 24-hour city. And where we lived at that particular time was not a 24-hour city.
We were in Los Angeles,
Yeah,
California.
still not 24, it wasn't a 24-hour city.
And they didn't have the trains yet either.
Right.
Thankfully, my brother purchased a used car during his time in college in Maryland. He would let us use it from time to time, and finally gave it to me once he relocated to California. Thank goodness, because having a second child and dealing with public transportation was not happening, especially with getting to doctor appointments, school, babysitters, work, and shopping. Not a party. And no, Paul still did not drive.
And no, I did not drive. That is correct. But there's a caveat. The caveat is that we had lived in New York, and while living in New York, you really didn't need a car. Really, a car was an inconvenience, particularly living where we lived, where you had alternate side parking in the part of Brooklyn that we lived in, which was Crown Heights. And so it was an adjustment for me to have a car once we moved to Maryland. And I didn't realize how badly we actually needed a car until I found out how far things are apart in Baltimore. And plus, the train system is not really, even to this day, it's not really fully developed. And it cannot even come close to being comparable to New York City's train system. So that is correct. I did not have a license.
Well, yes, I guess there is a difference. No, he did not have the license. He had the ability to drive, but he chose not to. So, and I would say that Paul is a chameleon. It works to his best interest. He's gonna find a way. If there's money to be made, he's gonna get there, license or no license. And he did. He did. And now for a mock minute. Thanks so much to our listeners. We got some feedback about last week's episode, and it was great. We especially enjoyed hearing from Mr. Rice, Son One's prior teacher and family friend. And this week, the question is, if you could remove a pain from your spouse, what would it be? And that, when I say spouse, it could be a partner or whatever type of relationship you're in. So I chose this question because Paul was listening to another podcast or skit on social media, and they asked the question. So I felt it would be interesting for us as well. So the pain I would remove from Paul is his relationship with his siblings, because he made a choice to further his life in a different way than they expected, and to this day they still feel that choice took his life in a different direction at their expense, which is not the case at all. So that's the one thing the pain I would remove from Paul.
It's something, and she's right, that does pain me. That my siblings might feel that way. But I think they have abandonment issues. They feel like I abandoned them, but that's really not what happened. But it's hard to get people to think otherwise, unfortunately. But it is something that does bother me. And now segue into Ellen, and what pain would I like to take away from her? And I would just think that some of the pain that she's had to deal with as far as with some of her family, um, and I know it bothers her, that she doesn't speak much about it. But, sometimes when you're the oldest, the expectations for you are higher than they are for your younger siblings. And a lot of times our younger siblings don't understand the expectations of being the oldest. And being the oldest child in a family brings along with it a lot of added pressures uh, that other people don't see. But I do think that, and in saying that, I think that's why me and Ellen are like kindred spirits, because we're two people who were the oldest children in our respective families. And so we understood or understand those pressures and those expectations. So I'm hoping that sometime in the future that that relationship between her siblings and her mom can be repaired. So is this something I'm hoping for? And I'm sure she hopes the same for me in some way. And I think it's on my side. I think there's a partial repair taking place right now. So that's all I have to say about that.
Well, a lot of people will think that because of Paul and I's background, that I would be the sweeter, more forgiving one. Well, you lied. Paul is. So I appreciate him wanting to take that pain away from me. And whereas I hope it's possible, I'm not holding my breath. And I'm not looking for it. If it happens, it happens. I'm not going for it. I'm not looking for it. And that's all. I will move on, move forward, and do what I need to do for me and mine. Just as, you know, his pain bothers him, but we're still here and we're still doing what we need to do for us, and hopefully everybody will understand and it'll reconcile. But if it doesn't, we're I'm good. I don't know about how about you?
I'm fine. There's not always, you can hope for a lot of things. I don't mean this is going to happen.
If it's in the cards, it's in the cards.
Right.
It's a bonus.
Life does have to go on, though. Life doesn't stop. Bills don't stop. Illnesses don't stop, or whatever. Things don't stop. So you still have to move forward.
Well, so that's all for this particular mock minute. Please comment on our platforms if there's a topic you would like us to discuss. And back to Son 2. So early one May morning, I went into labor after doing some nesting the day before. So off we went to the hospital once Paul got home from working at the ball field. Yes, he had a few jobs at the time. Once we headed to the hospital, I said about the business of having Son 2. Since I'd had a C-section with Son 1, I tried to have a natural birth this go round. 12 hours later, with no Son 2 in sight, they were concerned and decided another C-section it would be. Thankfully, this time around, it was not as intense as with Son 1, and I was back on my feet before leaving the hospital. However, I did deal with some postpartum depression, and the cries of Son 2 were intense. It was like a high-pitched squeak on a chalkboard. Fortunately, this time around, my mother came to stay with us to help care for me and the family a few weeks as I convalesced. I was more alert this go round since I was nursing, so I was more involved and felt the things that parents usually do: sleep deprivation, fatigue, and lack of focus. My mother didn't stay long, but the time she was there was helpful. She helped with the house, with son one, and the cooking. LOL. And she could not stand the cries of any child. And she could stand the cries of any child. However, when it came to son two, as he would start to cry, she would be like, go get him. She couldn't take it. I will say that son two was not to be ignored.
That is true. Uh, it's so true. As in when he was first born, he was a son or a child that you could not attend to. He craved attention. He liked being attended to, and he didn't want to feel like he was being left alone. As soon as you would walk out of that room, start crying. And he would not stay in that crib. He just wouldn't do it. So that is true.
Yeah. However, once I got myself back in order and we were moving and grooving as a family, I knew that son two was going to be okay from two things that occurred. I had his mattress set too high on his crib, and when I put him in it and turned my back, he jumped out. And once again, he jumped out of the bathtub when I stepped out of the bathroom to get his towel and soap. Yes, his brother was watching and playing with him, and I was literally right outside the door. And when I came back in there, was a wet baby on the floor, and son one looked just as confused as I did. Son two was also walking at 9 months, and I am not sure about the talking, but he understood. And these jumping incidents, he wasn't walking or talk. I don't think he was even crawling. I think he was like 3 or 4 months, maybe 6, when he jumped out of the tub and jumped out of his crib.
I think it was 6.
Like 6? Okay.
I remember when I would complain about the cost of daycare to Ellen. I think the cost was roughly $200 plus a week. One day I walked into the daycare to pay the weekly bill and saw a silhouette of son two walking on a computer, working on a computer with a mouse in his hand. Son two was 3.5 years of age. I never complained again about how much it cost, because when I saw him working on that computer and with that mouse in his hand, I said, he's going to make it. He's going to make it. Another thing about son two, too, he was a voracious reader. I mean, my goodness. You just couldn't stop him from reading. And when you would read one story, he'd be like, can you just read another one, Dad? He got to the point where me and Ellen were taking shifts. And then as he became older, when we would walk in, one time I walked in and he had a flashlight. He had the covers over his head. And he had a flashlight. And I don't know where he got this flashlight from. And he was reading then. So he always enjoyed reading. And I think he got that from his older brother, from son one, because he was a voracious reader as well. I mean, he read a lot of different texts and things, and he enjoyed reading too.
And the son too grew and headed to school. I saw daily in his actions as his wanting to soak up all of the books, as Paul said. He could have us read during his nightly reading time, and being his own person, no matter what was going on, he wanted his book read. He also had the privilege of going to pre-K and kindergarten, where he was eager to learn to read. And I believe we were both grateful when he learned to read. Now we had to go into his room at bedtime and make sure he was not using his flashlight to read under the covers. And though I did not know what son two would grow up to be, I knew, just as with son one, it would be great. And also, because of his wanting to read so much and having an older brother, he read and watched a lot of movies, which a lot of people would think would be out of his realm of understanding. I do believe he was in the 3rd grade reading the Harry Potter books because his brother was reading the Harry Potter books. And his brother loved the Malcolm X movie, so whenever it came on television, he watched the Malcolm X movie. And his brother read the Malcolm X book. I'm not sure if he read that in the 3rd grade or whether he read that a little later.
Mm-hmm.
But he knew about Mr. Malcolm X more than he did about Dr. Martin Luther King.
I think he had been exposed to it with that movie, and I do think that because Ryan was reading the book, Malcolm X. I think I'm not saying that he finished the book, but I do believe that he had been reading it. So yes, I also saw greatness in Sun Tzu's future. Unlike Sun One, who was extremely observant and always took a wait and see attitude, something that has been instrumental in his success, by the way. Sun Tzu was an adventurer at an early age. I consider Sun One a pragmatist and a planner. Sun Tzu was more of a risk taker, as evidenced by him jumping out of the tub at, at 6 months. Even today, Sun Tzu has an eclectic palate. He is always willing to visit different restaurants and try new dishes of food.
Though it was not always smooth sailing with Sun Tzu as he grew, especially in middle school. We were good in the sixth grade, and then we hit seventh and eighth, and we had a different child. Fortunately, around this time, we met my brother on my father's side. We always knew about each other, but because we had different families, we never met. Funnily, he was working in the area as a recruiter for the Marines and lived about an hour away in Fredericksburg. Wow. We connected on Facebook prior to our in person meeting. It was like we'd known each other all of our lives, though the last time I saw him was at our father's funeral, and he was about 9 and his sister about 3 or 4. It was really nice to have another male role model for Son too, and some cousins for him to play with. Unfortunately, it didn't last long. My brother was tired of recruiting and decided to get back into working in the Corps. He would either be headed further south or west. He decided to go west, and though he said he would return when he retired, I knew once he hit the lovely La La Land, there would be no return. And he has not returned, except to visit his family in the south. Son too got to spend some time with him when he first moved west and when we went to his retirement, but it's not like the long weekends we spent laughing way into the wee hours when they were in Virginia. I would like to thank my brother for opening my eyes and heart to the possibility of a service career for my son and getting him into football, two things I was deadly against. However, these two things allowed my son to gain more confidence and focus on his studies. Without it, his father and I were looking at FCC, which is the community college in our area, because it seemed like he had lost his oomph and focus for school.
Yes, I do think that him going to spend time with his uncle for that year, and also his aunt Ebony too, because she was very instrumental too and helped mold William, just as well as his uncle. Uh, I think it really did help William regain some focus because I think he had lost some focus when he was living here in Maryland during his middle school years, and so he went to high school for a year in uh, California, San Clemente High School, and I really think that was a game changer for him. And when he did come back to Maryland, William had definitely matured a lot, and I think he wasn't perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I could see that had an impact on him, and that he was also more appreciative of what he had here in Maryland. Um, and I think he was also more appreciative too of the educational system that we had here in Frederick County, because he even shared with me at one time that he thought the schools were more challenging here in Maryland than they were in California, in San Clemente, which was a wealthy school district, by the way. So I think it was a eye opening experience for him.
I I truly agree. And with all that said, as we stated with son one, we have two very successful sons, still young, so there's a lot to be said, a lot to be seen about what further things they have in their life, and we as their parents just look forward to it as we get our lives back into us for a while
Mm-hmm.
after, because as most people can attest, being married is one relationship, Having children is a second relationship. Getting back to marriage after the children is a third relationship.
Mm-hmm.
So,
And we haven't gone into this, and we will, I'm sure, into other podcasts. But then raising two black male sons too, in a predominantly white school district, that
very
brings
true.
on its own challenges as well. And you just have to make sure that your children understand the opportunities that they have. All right. And then also that your children are seen by their teachers. All right. And that they're viewed as, young men who really want to be successful, who are hardworking young men. Because the media, people have to understand teachers are human too. And they get influenced by the media just like anybody else. All right. So if you look at the media, a lot of times, what do you see when you see a young black male? Usually they are involved in some type of crime. Right. And so I never want my children to be considered, a stereotype. Just because they're young and black, that they don't want to be successful, or they're criminals, or they're thugs. And that's not the narrative for many young black males. That is not the narrative. But that's the narrative that we see through the media in most instances. There's a lot of positivity going on with young black males, but it's rarely shown in the media. And that's something I think is unfortunate. And as parents of young black males, we were cognizant of that and aware and engaged in what was going on at school, in school. And we didn't just depend on the school to educate our children. We took our children on trips. We took them to the museums. We took them, if we had the opportunity, like our one son, the oldest son, he had the opportunity to be in a program called People to People. And he traveled to New Zealand and Australia. Our youngest son, we had him. He's been to the Dominican Republic. He lived. He was in California. He lived in New York. Traveled to New York. They traveled to New York on a regular basis during the holidays, and they got to the point to where they just thought this was what everybody did. It was not. And then when they became older, it was like, Dad, we used to go to New York on a regular. I said, yes, you did. He said, well, we just saw all kids did that. I said, no. Oh, some kids haven't even seen New York. Some kids haven't even been to Washington, D.C. And so as they became older, they realized the type of opportunities that they had access to, or what they had been involved in.
And now that he's off his soapbox, I agree that and it's true. And he did mention it's our job as the parents of children of the world's children, any children that we can affect, to shine a light on the positivity of a person of color and show them the things that are not always shown on the media.
Right.
And make sure that their experience is as positive in the home once they close the door as it can be.
Mm-hmm. And I want to make sure that people that are listening to this podcast, I just want to tell you, I love all children, no matter what their race or socioeconomic background is. But I had to talk about black male children because of some of the statistics. The suicide rates that we see with adolescent black males, it's through the roof. And a lot of times people don't want to talk about, suicide, and particularly when it comes to young black males, but the stats are really alarming. So it's something that we just have to be focused on. And I think a lot of times too, a lot of our black males, they're very athletic. Some of them are tall, rangy, and a lot of times they actually do look older than they actually are. We have a tendency to forget that they are still children and they have feelings. And, a lot of times that stereotype can hurt them because they're not given the same breath as other kids are that are their ages. So that are as young as they are. And so we just have to be cognizant, and parents too have to be aware. This is something I learned after I became a teacher. And my wife even taught me the way that you talk to your children. You can't always be gruff and aggressive towards them. You have to have a supportive stance. Speak to them in a nurturing way and fashion. And it took me some time to learn that. So and it's very important to do that. And it's nothing. It's not being soft or, that's the thing. You gonna make him soft. It's not that. You just want to, you want to make sure that he understands what it means to be loved. Because how can a young person show love if they've never seen it? So we have to be aware of that, particularly with our young boys.
That's very true. And as he was saying about um, some of the black male children being looked at as older because of their body frames, I have a funny tale to end this podcast with. We were at the repast of uh, basically a family member because we've known them so long, the loss of their father. And we were just sitting around laughing and joking. And I believe my husband was in one part of the house and I was in the other part. But the night was kind of wrapping up and people were leaving and we were kind of sitting off. There's like a sitting area, like right inside the door. So everybody that was going out was walking past us. And this older lady, I don't know if she was a family friend or a relative. And she walked by and we were talking. Paul may have known her because he's known some of the family members longer than I have. So our younger son too walks up and she's like, "Oh, who is this handsome young man? He's really good looking." So I was like, "Oh, okay." So her and Paul continue to talk and I, son too wanted my attention. I think he was going to do something with our friend's kids or whatever, or he was trying to check in to see if we were ready to go, whatever it was. So that's the only reason he stood there that long. So she says it again. So, so I look at Paul and I think another of our friends came up and he kind of sat off on the couch. And she's still like she's eyeing my son. Mind you, he was I think that was his senior year. And I will admit, he had been playing football, he had been wrestling, track. He was in good physical shape. He had this nice suit on. He's a good looking child. But she could have been his grandmother. All of that was unnecessary. So she said something else, and I think she got ready to say it again, and Paul must have rushed her out because he knew. I was like, if she say that one more again, I said, I don't care whose house we in, she getting ready to get cursed out because that's just a little too much. And Paul just kind of looked and got her out the door, and after he left, him and our other friend started laughing. I said, yeah, you better laugh because she was getting ready to get a beat down. And I don't even think Son 2 realized what was happening because he was focused on whatever it was that he wanted to do. And after the lady walked out, he asked whatever and went on back to what he was doing. But I was in shock. As you can see, we still discuss this to this day. And as you hear in the background, Mr. Paul is cracking up. So I will leave you with that. And ladies, watch your sons. They out here. They out here. And our disclaimer is we are not therapists, just hoping to help others through our crazy love story. Would you get it together?
I am. Wait, go ahead, read it. Okay.
Go ahead.
You have to keep reading because I'm lost my place.
Shout out to everyone who took a few moments out of their day to listen. We hope that anything you heard was helpful. If you want to do something, donate your time, talent, or funds to a cause you feel is worthy.
Or just send a note of thank you to someone you know working hard at whatever it is that they do, making lasting change in their field.
And if you feel so moved, please check out our merch at our Etsy store, Ease Tees, or use the Linktree app. And in honor of Son 1 and Son 2, there are Son 1 and Son 2 t-shirts in the store, which will be on sale through the end of the week at a 30% off discount. And it will also be running a buy one, get one half off sale for the Black Friday holiday. So check us out at Ease Tees. And also head on over to Amazon and Check out a copy of Vignettes of a South Central Sun by none other than Paul G. Mock.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thanks for joining us this week on EsaysPsays, your weekly dose of Black love. Check us out on our social media platforms: Facebook, EsaysPsays, Instagram at EsaysPsays, TikTok at EsaysPsays, YouTube at EsaysPsays Live, and on X at EsaysPsays. And make sure you subscribe to our podcast on your preferred platform so that you don't miss any of our episodes. And feel free to leave any questions or comments on one of our social media platforms. And great news, I took the time to make the necessary corrections, and we are now on Apple Podcasts. So make sure you follow and subscribe. See you next week.
1,